synthetically, it's 2 steps from tryptophan, right? 2 trivial enzymatic steps from tryptophan. Well, tryptophan is an amino acid, of course, and it's everywhere. So all organisms have tryptophan, and all organisms have the 2 key enzymes that lead to the synthesis of DMT. And these enzymes are very ancient enzymes. They're all over the place. They're, again, part of basic metabolism. So theoretically, anything could synthesize DMT.
DMT is astonishingly widely available in plants and animals all around the world, but so far nobody really knows why it's there or what its function is.
That's a $64 billion question, is why is DMT in our bodies? Why is it in plants, in all sorts of mammals? And what is the role it plays in humans?
The conventional wisdom 30, 40 years ago was that these things had no real function. They were just sort of physiological noise, but that's a very naive understanding. And what we now understand is that these secondary compounds are, in a sense, the language of plants. These are messenger molecules. This is what plants use to mediate their relationships with other organisms in the environment.
Why is it that human beings' central nervous system are wired to receive this experience? Must be that, there's important information to be learned.
So I don't think it's universally present in nature by accident. It has a real function. We have co-evolved with these plants. There's a purpose and a meaning to it.
So it really fits in with the notion that DMT may be the common molecular language, resonant language, among all living beings on this planet and maybe others as well. I can't think of a more powerful tool to explore the whole question of what is consciousness.
These substances are tools that can be used to expand awareness in all areas of life and apply that expanded awareness for the betterment of people's lives and their community, their families, and our society.
The good news is that there's a growing number of Westerners and actually intellectuals, scientists, artists, movers and shakers, filmmakers, and so on, who realize that this stuff is all too interesting just to go on keeping it swept under the rug. And meanwhile, the Inquisition was a long time ago. The birth of rationalism was a long time ago. At this point, there's no good reason, apart from bad habit, to keep up these barriers.
With the help of 2 concepts that are traditionally opposed, science and spirituality, we humbly reintroduce psychedelics back into the cultural dialogue.
DMT, the spirit molecule, it's a conundrum, it's a paradox. What the spirit is the inner world. The molecule is the external world. So the psychedelics or entheogens take us from the science to the spirit.
I was drawn to the pineal gland, which is a very small organ in the center of the brain, which has always been an object of interest and even veneration for a lot of esoteric physiological disciplines. I thought, it wasn't totally crazy to presume a pineal site of origin of DMT. Which, fit in nicely with my theory that the pineal was somehow involved in naturally occurring mystical states.
This hypothesis proposes that the pineal gland at certain times, when it's under a specific stress or stimulation, it releases a significant amount of this hormone, DMT, and it's that hormone that facilitates the entering and exiting of the soul in the body. This is what the Jewish sage mystics have been describing in a coded language for literally thousands of years.
Through meditation, through fasting, chanting, any number of techniques, there might be a burst of endogenous DMT that was correlated with mystical and near-death experiences. And I had this theory that there is a big similarity between psychedelics and experiences that were possible with a lot of meditation. And that was one of the original findings that led me to start looking for a spirit molecule, for a compound in the brain that elicited mystical experience.
I think there may be a role for DMT in explaining any number of hallucinatory phenomena that man has experienced throughout his history. Creativity, imagination, dream states, changes that occur due to isolation, trauma, starvation, all of which produce hallucinatory phenomena. These hallucinatory phenomena are explainable by the presence of compounds known to produce hallucinations. And the only compounds that we know of that are capable of doing this are the class of compounds known as hallucinogens.
When thinking about spiritual states, I think endogenous hallucinogenic compounds and molecules that the brain can potentially release are probably very relevant to this topic, because on one hand, they may really help us to elucidate what is the neurochemical mechanism of these experiences. I mean, if we can say that there's a release of endogenous opiates, or we can say that there's a release of dopamine or something like that, and we can measure that release, and we can see where in the brain those different molecules go, what receptors they activate or deactivate, and hence we can really learn a lot more about what these experiences are, because it really can allow us to match up these experiences that people have with hallucinogens, as well as understanding where they are related in the context of the brain's receptors and the different parts of the brain that may or may not become active.
One of the other interesting things about the pharmacology of DMT is that it's actively transported into the brain. And so you have to wonder about the role of DMT in just everyday, normal, perceptual, activity. Too much DMT and things become very psychedelic, or, not enough, DMT in the brain can make things dull and flat and gray.
There's something that, for me, makes sense about DMT. You called it the spirit molecule. It might almost be called, the reality molecule. Philosophically, it makes sense that something that would be so fundamental to the way we perceive reality would be imbued out there in reality.
There was a sense around it that there was something special, that it wasn't like anything else. There wasn't like other psychedelics. Its intensity and speed was such that it really produced a different kind of response. I mean, I remember almost getting the sense that it was kind of like a psychedelic bungee jump, that there was a kind of raw leap into this rapidly changing environment that was very different than the more gradual approaches of other psychedelics.
Smoke DMT is sort of like the drive-by shooting of psychedelics. You're in one place, bang, you're in another place, and then bang, you're back down. So it doesn't leave a whole lot of room for that narrative of who am I, what am I doing here, why am I in this space, what am I learning? It's almost like there was too much information to process in that few minute span to integrate once you drop back down.
Dimethyltryptamine, when it's administered, has a very rapid onset and a very short duration of action. This is because it's very rapidly broken down by the body so that it can be cleared.
DMT is rapidly degraded by an enzyme in the liver called monoamine oxidase, or MAO. That's the reason it's not active when you take it by mouth. Whereas psilocybin, when you take it by mouth, it's not broken down by monoamine oxidase very quickly at all. So it gets through the liver and passes on into the bloodstream and into the brain.
Yeah, I'm very interested in ayahuasca. When I began my studies in the early 1990s, ayahuasca was just starting to make inroads into the West, but it's obviously become a lot more popular in the last 10, 15 years. And the visionary ingredient in ayahuasca is DMT. Through some amazing feat of pre-literate chemistry, the Amazonian natives stumbled upon or combined whatever. I don't know how they did it, but they found that one plant contains DMT and one plant contains an enzyme inhibitor. Combine them, you can drink DMT and it's orally active. So it starts working in a half hour, lasts for 3 or 4 hours. And you can, maneuver a lot more comfortably within that state than you can when you're just smoking it or injecting it.
Orally active ayahuasca tends to pick you up and gently carry you into the space and hug you and embrace you and clean you and show you all sorts of mystical visions, and then it very gently brings you back down like you're floating on a feather back to the ground.
As valuable as my DMT experiences have been, I feel that there's a lot more enduring value, really, in this folk technology, which stretches it out and makes it a navigable space. Our whole Western, European-derived tradition of distilling alcohols and isolating chemicals and making everything stronger and taking it out of nature and putting it into the biggest punch that we can, I don't think that generally that's the most useful way. I think there's a reason that cultures have learned to turn a 5-minute experience into a 5-hour experience. It seems to me that ayahuasca has had a plan and that it's reached out into the world and brought DMT into many, many thousands of lives in a much bigger canvas than it had reached for the last 10,000 or however many years. And it's done it very rapidly, and it's done it with form to go with it.
And ayahuasca is much harder for the power structures that we have now. It's much harder for them to put down because it has been part of a legitimate religious and spiritual practice for thousands of years, certainly in the Amazon. And we can't just dismiss all that as primitive mumbo jumbo and superstition. We have to get to grips with that on its own terms.
I think that there's a growing number of people who feel this desire to get back in touch with nature, with plants, with animals, and who know that through the shamanic path there's a way of doing this, and that actually these tools, these psychoactive tools for plants like ayahuasca is a very direct way of doing this. Now, it may not be everybody's cup of tea, and I think a lot of people are actually with reason afraid of it.
I think like a lot of people in my generation, I first heard about DMT through Terence McKenna. And it was a very funny way to become aware of such a powerful and interesting and anthropologically rich topic as a compound like DMT, because it really became more, it was almost more of a concept than something that people were necessarily taking.
The DMT flash makes it clear that disembodied consciousness is a possibility. I think that the whole tension of history and the tension of life seems to be about the shedding of the body.
Terence was he was a good promoter. Basically, he said it's the ultimate metaphysical reality pill. And even though it's not a pill, but I thought that was a pretty good characterization after I took it. It seemed to be of a different order than LSD and mescaline and some of the other things that were around. DMT really did seem to be a whole other level of experience.